Welcome back to the Horror Master YouTube channel. Welcome back to episode number 18 of my controversial album cover series, where we cover album covers that were controversial at one point, might be controversial in the future, or are still controversial for some for second reason. So in this latest episode, we're gonna be tackling probably one of the first compilation album that I've done in this series so far, and it is a band that a lot of people told me, why didn't you do certain albums before, which I'll talk about those in a bit. And of course, I'm talking about the first compilation album by the almighty Carcass, with of course their infamous album called Wake Up and Smell the Carcass, released on November 12th, 1996 by Eric Records. So this compilation album was released a day after yours truly was born, so it's kind of fitting. And of course, I've had the opportunity to see Carcass live. Hell, I even had the chance to catch one of Jeff's, bass picks, which I was fucking awesome when I had the chance to see Carcass with Behemoth and Arch Enemy and others. So that was pretty fucking amazing concert I went to last year, and again, Carcass, amazing band live. So Carcass at the beginning were considered a grindcore band, of course, were the two famous albums, Breakup, Rejection, and Symphonies of Sickness, which a lot of people ask me, why haven't I done a video on those two albums, since those two albums kind of started the whole controversy with Carcass. And for some extent I do agree, but those albums are going to be separate for future episodes along the future. But when it came to Carcass, this was the first album cover that I automatically thought in my mind. So just to give you a bit of a kind of a description of the album cover, which I know we have the album cover the whole time, it's pretty much a picture of JFK's assassination, the aftermath. Even though there are rumors out there that the U.S. government doesn't acknowledge this picture and has never existed, which, knowing the U.S. government, well, they lie a lot. I mean, any government, especially U.S. government, lies a lot about other stuff. But it comes with the JFK, which, don't even get me started on the JFK conspiracy theory. There's so many out there that just go on hours and hours on it. But this album cover, how it came to out. So this album cover was released in 1996. What a lot of people don't know, that around this time, Carcass was already broken up, which happened in 1995 before Swan Song. Yeah, so Swan Song was released in the same year in 96, I think in the summer of 96. And of course, the band was already broken up in 95 because of, legals with the record label, with Sony, and of course, tensions between the band. The band broke up in 1995, which delayed this album to be not to for Swan Song to be released a year later in 96. So by this time, the band was already gone to separate ways. I think Jeff was in Black Star at the moment. And around this time, there were some songs that weren't used in the Swan Song album. So Diggy, of course, the founder of Eric Records, contacted Jeff to kind of make a compilation album of those unreleased tracks, some B-side demos, and some live tracks for release, a sort of best of compilation of Carcass, sort of, not really. And of course, when Dig asked about Jeff about the album cover, he was shocked that Jeff decided to go back into the gruesome artwork, since the first two albums were very gruesome. And of course, after Hard Work and Swan Song, they kind of left away the brutalness and gruesomeness to a more kind of commercial, as the perfect way to describe it. So Digby was surprised when Jeff decided to have this album cover as the compilation album. And a lot of fans out there, I mean, I'm not sure how it was to been when it was released in 96, but I think from the stories that I've read, I think originally this album cover was never released proper, in terms of like, as in your face. So somehow, some way, the record label was smart enough that they decided to put the black cover of the album before the album was going to be released. And that's so when you open the album cover, you have the original album cover. So actually the record label did a smart thing because knowing the backlash that it could have had on, on a lot of people, especially a lot of people who are really related to the Kennedy family and their associates, that would have taken offended on this kind of travesty that they have a portrait of John F. Kennedy's dead body after assassination, his skull wide open. You can see the fucking brain in his skulls and the eyes just popping like crazy, kind of showing disrespect to an American icon, especially it's been since was at the time it was 20 years. I think it was been 20 years since the assassination of JFK, in Dallas, Texas. So for a lot of fans who are really hardcore JFK enthusiasts, they were taken offended. But I honestly, I don't think I try to research a lot of people who were offended by this album cover. And like I mentioned before, I didn't find one single thing. But it always comes up because it's kind of those big what ifs. What if the band would have released the original album cover as it is without the black cover, and then with the backlash from that, they would have to get those albums out of the shelf and re-release it with the black cover, which is one of those things that I think this is the first time in this entire series that, like, in don't quote me on that the first time of the album cover was not really controversial. It began to sort of become more controversial as the years gone by, and Eric decided to release, or really bootlegs, mostly that Eric bootlegs decided to come out there with the original album cover uncensored. And of course, some people took offense to it, especially people, like I mentioned before, are fascinated or admire and respect, everything that the Kennedy family has done, from John F. Kennedy to Robert Kennedy, everything the Kennedys have done for the United States and America as a whole, or even the world, being that Kennedy was the first ever Catholic president. A lot of Catholics were offended by that, which is not really, you know, more. It's not really that common with album covers. I mean, for fuck's sake, I'm wearing my Brujeria Matando Güeros t-shirt, so that kind of proves a point. But you know, as the years have gone by, I kind of don't see this as a commercial album cover. It was controversial at one point, but can you imagine showing this to somebody like, okay, hear me out. Imagine showing this album cover to your history professor. Me, as a person who studied history, my minor's in history. If I would have showed this to my professor when I was in college, show him this gruesome artwork, he would have thought I was out of my mind and disrespectful and a big what the fuck person that just showed them to this blasphemy thing kind of thing. Which to a certain extent it is true, but you know, this the thing with Carcass was that they're not afraid to push buttons. We know that from their first two albums, Breakup, Faction and 7 Days of Sickness, which those two album covers, like I mentioned before, I might do a future video in this series about those two album artworks, because those two album artwork kind of had more backlash at the release. But when it comes to Carcass, this was the first one that thought to my mind, because I knew from the minute I saw that album cover, it was gonna piss some people off. It did piss some people off, but not to the extent of the world ending. It only pissed off a small percentage of people, unlike my previous videos I've done in the past, where some album covers pissed off either an entire country, an entire ethnic group, an entire religion group. Like this was a small percentage of people were pissed off and offended by the album cover, but Carcass didn't give a shit. And of course, like I mentioned before, later on, Eric and some bootlegs were re-released with the original album cover uncensored, and I personally prefer it that way. Even though the black censored album cover is sort of a bit of iconic, I kind of like this album cover more because of the shockness. And like I mentioned before, can you imagine showing this to your history professor, or hell, just show it to a family member? Be like, hey, mom and dad, look, I just have the latest Carcass in my collection. It's just fucking Kennedy's head blown off with the autopsy on that, which it's kind of disgusting, but kind of brutal. And I fucking even the songs, like I mentioned before, mostly beat tracks, mostly songs that were unreleased during the Swan Song sessions and some live tracks. It's a really good album, really good compilation album that hopefully one day I can have it in the collection, and I can easily get it on eBay or Discogs. But there's some albums out there that are from this series I'm slowly but surely getting into my collection from doing these videos, because what if one day, not this one of these album covers once again is in the middle of some controversy, and unlikely, but you never know, the record label or whomever is has the rights to these records, they decided to remove them from record stores, from any streaming media. You never fucking know, and that's why these controversial album covers are so important to the history of metal, and to some extent even rock, which eventually there's gonna be some rock albums I'm gonna do in the future. But with Carcass, Wake Up and Smell the Carcass, a compilation album, John F. Kennedy's head blown off. What more can I have to describe about that, and the backlash that it could have had in the world, especially in the United States. But I don't think, like I mentioned before, maybe somebody out there knows a bit more of the backlash that originally, you know, this album cover did to any Kennedy enthusiast. That's a perfect way I can say it. But if you haven't listened to this compilation album, go give it a listen. It's pretty good, and just stare at that album cover the entire time you're listening to it. It's something out of this fucking world, to be honest, people. And that's for this video, guys. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. Like I mentioned before, I have 2 episodes left for the amount of episodes I'll mention. Of course, for episode 19, I'm gonna be talking about typo negatives, the origin of feces, and of course for episode 20, I'm gonna be doing Iron Maiden's The Number of the Beast. I'm already starting to plan the next kind of 5 episodes to 6 episodes I'm gonna do eventually in the future. And like I mentioned before, guys, there's so many album artworks I have yet to talk about. Like I mentioned before, the first 2 Carcass albums. I know there's some other artworks that I yet need to discuss, which this series is gonna go for a while, and I mean a really long while, because the more metal album covers are released, the metal album covers are discovered, the more controversy some of them could actually impact on the world, even to Cannibal Corpse, which, like I mentioned before, I might do one separate video on Cannibal Corpse by itself, but that's in the future. But hope you guys really enjoying the videos I've been doing lately. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay safe, everyone, and until next time, stay metal.